Senator Heller.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and Commissioner, thank you for being here today and spending time with us. I want to thank Senator Thune for his questioning. It was one of the issues I wanted to talk about, and obviously that was the bonuses to the employees. And Mr. Chairman, if I could request that we get a copy of the agency policy on this issue so we can take a look at it, I would appreciate it.
That's fine. We'll be happy to provide that.
Also, I'd like to mention what National Taxpayer Advocate Nina Olson said in a recent report to Congress. She said, taxpayers this year are likely to receive the worst level of taxpayer services since at least 2001, when the IRS implemented its current performance measures. And I guess I want to ask you if this is a fair assessment.
I'm not an expert on what 2001 looked like, but it clearly is going to be a difficult filing season, and the service is going to be, if not miserable, abysmal, whatever it is, it'll be a level of service that none of us believe taxpayers deserve.
Okay. So miserable is a word that you guys use quite a bit. That would
count.
Be a reasonable assessment of
right.
what taxpayers can expect. You said multiple times during your hearings today that you're doing significantly more with significantly less. Could you quantify significantly less? You've mentioned it several times, but quantify it. Is it 3% less, 5% less? What are we talking about?
In terms of our ability to perform?
What are you talking about? Necessary budget cuts. Significantly less. What's the dollar amount or percentage we're talking about?
Of the budget cuts?
Yes.
Since 2010, the budget's been cut by $1.2 billion. At the same time,
what percentage is that? What
pardon?
percentage? What percentage is that?
That's what, 10 or 12%?
10 or 12%. So we would argue to the American taxpayer family that also has to do significantly more with significantly less, that perhaps if they should, perhaps the IRS should also.
We are doing significantly more with significantly less. As just discussed, we have significant statutory mandates we've been given that we have no choice but to implement. And in fact, as I noted, it's ironic that in the bill that cuts our budget, we were given yet 2 new programs to set up, start, and initiate. So that it's not a question of we're doing the same amount of work with less money. We're doing significantly more work.
All right. And I would argue that the average taxpayer is out there doing the same thing.
Right.
The chairman of Ways and Means recently introduced legislation that would bar the IRS. I believe it's called Stop Targeting of Political Beliefs of the IRS Act. That would bar the IRS from changing the guidelines for tax-exempt 401c4 groups until the end of 2017. I think the IRS, if I'm not mistaken, is expected to reissue new rules. And could you be more specific as to when those new rules would come about?
We don't have a timeline for those. I've noted one of the Inspector General's recommendations a year and a half ago when he made the report about the use of what he termed improper criteria for identifying organizations applying for tax-exempt status, said that we should review and clarify what the facts and circumstances would be that would determine how much political activity was allowable. The first proposal put out by the IRS and Treasury before I started managed to sort of aggravate people across the entire spectrum and generated 160,000 comments. We've worked our way through very carefully through those comments. I've read over 1,200 pages of the most thoughtful and detailed comments. Our goal is to make sure that we end up with a standard that's clear, much clearer than the present standard, fair to everybody. We're looking at which organization it should apply to, and easy to administer. To the extent we can, we'd like to get out of the determination of political activity one way or the other, and have a standard that's clear not only for us, but a standard clear for organizations as they're operating. They ought to have a clear, much clearer than facts and circumstance standard, so they're comfortable what they're doing is appropriate and that nobody's going to second guess them and suddenly say they're no longer tax exempt because they've exceeded some vague, hard to understand terminology. But at this point, I can't give you a deadline.
Commissioner, thank you. I want to go back to Nina Olson's recent report, and I was disturbed in that report that in assessing the IRS said that it lacked a clear rationale of resource allocation. Specifically, Olson said the agency has said that it would not answer complex tax laws on the phone or at walk-in centers. Further, after tax season, employers are being told not to answer any tax law question despite the fact that 15 million taxpayers will have obtained filing exemptions. I guess the question is how do you expect taxpayers to adequately comply with the complex tax laws under Obamacare or FATCO, since they have no resources to help them implement it?
It's a significant challenge and one that we're concerned about. My only disagreement with Nina on that is that we have actually carefully looked at how can we provide the best service we can with the resources we have, and the decision was made last year that if we continued to answer, which we used to do, complicated calls, by definition, the queue would get longer. And so therefore, we told employees that they needed to answer straightforward questions, complicated questions, the taxpayer would have to go to our website or elsewhere. The people who care most about that are our employees. As I wandered around the country last year visiting offices, their question was, we know the answer, why can't we do it? And the answer I gave them was, if you take longer to answer a complicated call, the number of people in line gets longer, the waiting time gets longer. Trying to minimize the inconvenience to taxpayers as much as we can.
Is that significantly more or significantly less from expectations from the taxpayers?
I think the taxpayers have a right to expect that they can call the IRS, get an answer, get on the phone with an assister within 2 to 5 minutes, get their questions answered satisfactorily so they can file. That's not something that our resources allow. And all I'm saying is,
I'm just saying it sounds like significantly less.
It's significantly
not significantly
more. What's happening now is we have significantly less resources, and our service is significantly less.
But you just told me you were doing more.
We're doing more. We're answering more calls than we've answered before with our people, but because of the fact that there are even more calls, the demand is up, the level of service is down, and that's simply because we don't have enough people. It's not because they're not dedicated. It's not because they don't care. They care substantially about it.
And I'm not arguing that point.
Right.
Commissioner, thank you. Mr. Chairman, thank you.